Hello, everybody. It's me, Robinson.
And it's me, the Pan and the Labyrinth, I guess.
Yes. Fun
Hmm.
fact: in Spanish, it's just called the Fawn's Labyrinth. In English, they just put Pan there in order to get more attraction,
Oh, really?
even though it has nothing to do with the Greek god Pan.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's not even a god, right? Isn't Pan like a demigod? He's like,
Is he?
yeah, because he's a faun, right? But Pan is just like the king of the fauns, so there's not really much there for him to actually be god over, right?
Oh, dog. I'm sorry. The last time I read Percy Jackson was like in middle school.
Yeah, well, I
I'm
mean,
rust. I'm rusty on my Percy Jackson lore.
man, like, who gives a shit, right? Because this is supposed to be just whatever. Okay, so for those of our viewers who don't know, or listeners, we are doing movie podcasts where we're going to be going over older or like more odd movies, and maybe even some that I haven't really seen. Um,
We'll
so
get to that.
yeah, we'll get to an announcement later. But if you would like to watch with us and kind of take some notes, we did watch the movie either yesterday or today, so it's fresh in our mind, and we actually did take notes. But we're going to share something that we found, some stuff that we have, and some criticisms. And yeah, Pan's Labyrinth came out
And
in 2006, right? So
Yep. And if you'd like to join along, go ahead, pause this podcast, go watch it, or you know what, don't if you don't wanna.
yeah, right. So Pan's Labyrinth was made by Guillermo del Toro, and it was out in May 26, or sorry, May 27th, 2006, at the Cannes Film Festival. So I don't know if you know this, but the Cannes Film Festival has this option, or not this option, but this thing that they do, this tradition, where if a film ends, you have applause, and they actually measure the applause by how many minutes people continuously clap. And Pan's Labyrinth is considered to be one of the longest pauses with like or that kind of stuff, because I think the reception was, it was like they clapped for 7 minutes or something like that. So
Jeez.
yeah, obviously it was like really good, and I think there's not very many other films at the Cannes Film Festival that have actually beaten that record, as far as I know. So
I'd be a horrible audience member. I'm done after like 7 claps. I'm like, all right, I'm good. I'm sitting
yeah,
back down.
I know, right? Does it become like a sketch at that moment where you're just sitting there, just like, yeah, we're still here. 7 minutes later, clapping. My hands are turning red. Can I please stop? Like,
Well, that's how much they love the movie. How much did you love this movie? How much pain are you willing to endure for me?
oh, God, how much? Yeah. So I um, have seen this film only once before, and I'm interested to know what you've ever seen. Have you actually ever seen this film before, Robinson?
No, I didn't. I knew so little about the film that so for our audience, I'm a Mexican, a native Spanish speaker. So when you can watch it on Netflix. When it was playing, and everything was in Spanish, I was like, huh, my uncle must have been using my account. Everything's in Spanish.
Mm-hmm. And then you
So
realize that it was like the opening
I,
title sequence is both in
yeah,
Spanish.
exactly. And then I realized it was Euro Spanish, European Spain Spanish, not Mexican Spanish.
Yeah.
So that's when I realized, oh, wait a minute. So I checked. Yeah, it does not have an English dub. In fact, Guillermo that I'm not gonna say his name right.
Guillermo del Toro.
Guillermo,
Guillermo.
the Big Bull.
Yeah, Guillermo del Toro. So
So the Big Bull actually turned down a lot of money from Hollywood for English dub because he didn't want to compromise the message of the film. In fact, the Big Bull wrote the subtitles himself because he wanted for English because he wanted to make sure that the correct message got across, which is something that I did notice because what they were saying. Um, there's always a direct translation and like a colloquial translation
right. Well, I mean,
when going from languages.
as someone who like speaks German fluently, right? It's one of those things of like, do you actually translate it like literally, or do you do it the metaphor? What is the meaning versus what is the actual literary thing that you're trying to look at, right? So,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, exactly.
at least like he was able to do that because he is the person that would know how to translate this to get the meaning. Because I feel like for artists, especially for directors like Guillermo del Toro, is that you want to give that meaning across, right? So, and he is very much an artist, especially within his own kind of like allocades of work or archives of work that he's done. By the way, I actually looked it up. I was trying to make sure that I wasn't spreading false rumors. It's not 7 minutes. It's actually 22 minutes, and it's considered to be the longest standing ovation at Cannes Film Festival history. So, this is
Who?
a yeah, this is a
Okay,
good film. Yeah,
I can say this. Everybody was there for 3 minutes, and for the next like 17 minutes, it was just like four guys. I can
yeah.
I could say that confidently.
You
They're like,
know,
no, this has to win.
man, I don't know. Like the Cannes Film Festival, because God forbid someone actually has an aneurysm and gives us like tickets to go see the Cannes Film Festival. I don't know, man. Like it's gonna be one of those of just like Robinson. These French people love their films. You just gotta chill out. You just gotta do what they do. And here's some alcohol. You're of drinking age in France, so who cares,
Bro, I just want a hot dog. How long do we have to keep clapping?
dude? I don't know. I'm gonna get like the industrial sized bucket of popcorn, because Jesus. But
It's child size because you could fit a small child in the bucket.
yeah, but still. So why don't we go ahead and do like a small little synopsis over the film, and then we can do a, what we thought of the film, right? So if you mind, I can do the synopsis if you don't mind, Robinson. If
That's
okay.
fine. I do want to share one fun fact
Yeah.
before we get going with this
Okay.
because this is an incredible thing to me. So Toro, when he was making this movie, he was debating. He had two career choices at that point. When he was before like even production started, he was like, "Do I want to make Pan's Labyrinth or do I take this Marvel deal to make a big Marvel movie?" Because he did great on Blade 2 and Hellboy.
Mm-hmm.
So he was debating which one he would want to do. Um, no confirmation on which Marvel movie he would do, but there were rumors that he would make a Doctor Strange movie, like back in 2006. So guess what? He lost his notes in a London cab. He lost basically 7 years of notes for Pan's Labyrinth.
Dude, that
Because
fucking sucks. Like I get
he
missing
did.
that kind of thing because that's awful. I hate that. That fucking
Ho-
makes me mad.
yeah, Home
Yeah.
Dog was like heartbroken because yeah, he just lost like 7 years of notes. Because if you see these notes, they're beautiful. They're handwritten, hand drawn. He's got the monsters in there. He's got fairies. It's fantastic.
Hmm.
And when he gets to his hotel, he's like, "All right, well, this is gonna be a sign. If I get these notes back, I'm making the movie. If I don't, I'm just gonna take the Marvel deal." According to him, as soon as he had that thought, he got a phone call, and it was a cab driver saying, "Hey, I have all your notes."
Oh my
And
god.
with that, he immediately rejected the Marvel deal and went, "I'm making Pan's Labyrinth."
Dude, 100%. That's so good. Like,
That,
kudos for that fucking cab driver, man. Like, that cab driver did not have to do that.
yeah,
I,
because what happened was, him and the cab driver had like a solid conversation, and the cab driver remembered that he was like Toro was like a huge comics nerd, and Toro, well, he knew the hotel he was staying at, right? Because he drove him there. So he put two and two together. He's like, "Oh, this is the comic guy's notes." And to thank him, Toro gave him $900 as a tip.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's crazy. But
That's insane.
still, spoiler alert for anyone who's not watched the movie. As we said before, if you haven't watched the movie, this is your final chance before we start talking about it. So, if you want to watch a movie that is what um, over about to be close to 20 years old, like in a couple of years, then please go watch it right now on Netflix. It's free if you have a subscription to Netflix, but still. All right. So, to begin off, in a fairy tale, Princess Moana, whose father is the king of the underworld, visits the human world, where the sunlight blinds her and erases her memory. She becomes mortal and eventually dies. The king believes that eventually her spirit will return to the underworld, so he builds a labyrinth, which acts as portals around the world in preparation for her return. In 1944, Francoist Spain, 10-year-old Ophelia travels with her pregnant but sickly mother Carmen to meet Captain Vidal, her new stepfather. Vidal is the son of famed commander who died in Morocco, believes strongly in fascism and has been assigned to hunt down the Republican rebels in the mountains. A large stick insect, which Ophelia believes to be a fairy, leads Ophelia to an ancient stone labyrinth, but she's stopped by Vidal's housekeeper, Mercedes, who is secretly supporting her brother Pedro and other rebels. That night, the insect appears in Ophelia's bedroom, where it transforms into a fairy and leads her through the labyrinth. There she meets a faun who believes she is the reincarnation of Princess Moana. He gives her a book and tells her she will find it in three... and tells her she will find in it 3 tasks to complete in order to acquire her immortality and return to her kingdom. Ophelia goes through and completes the 3 tasks, but eventually Carmen dies out of childbirth, and Vidal takes the son and locks her up in the big house. Now, well, I mean, that's just essentially what happens, right? So
It is.
as
I
soon as
just
the
love
conflict
big
between
house.
as soon as the conflict between the big house happens, Mercedes enters the labyrinth and comforts a motionless but breathing. Or sorry, not that. As soon as the conflict between the rebels and the fascists start going through, Ophelia grabs her brother and runs through the labyrinth with a drunk and high on morphine Vidal through the labyrinth, to where eventually she is shot, the brother is taken, and Vidal dies, and then she dies because Vidal shot her, and returns to the underworld, where Princess Moana at the end states that she returns to the other underworld, rules wisely for many centuries, and then leaves without a trace except for people who are knowledgeable on how to find these traces from the human realm. And that kind of ends the fairy tale. So allegedly, right? So I think that there is that big kind of question, right, about is this a real kind of thing or not? But
Yeah, because like at the ending, how it was is that Vidal finds her, grabs a baby boy, shoots her, right?
yeah,
And when he shoots her, that's when she enters the underworld, and the Grand King, the Queen has the baby brother, and the Fawn are like, "We knew you'd be back." But the movie doesn't end there, because it cuts back to her in the real world, right, dying on the floor. Like she
Yeah.
gives one last smile before she dies. So I saw that, and I was thinking, was everything a hallucination?
yeah,
Because when she was talking to the fawn in that ending scene, and the fawn's like, "Hey, give me your baby brother and let me cut him a little bit."
yeah,
Vidal did not see. So the camera pans to Vidal's point of view, and Vidal did not see the fawn.
right,
Right? To him, Ophelia was just talking. She was talking with nobody there. Right?
right,
So it
yeah,
made me think like, maybe he can't see the magic because he doesn't believe. But like her death made it seem like maybe everything was a hallucination. Maybe she was making a bunch of it up. But there are clues in the movie that point to it being real, not
yeah.
not just a hallucination.
Yeah, so the one of the things that I kind of understand about how it could be is that I did read a review after watching the movie saying that this was a way for children to cope during times of stress, like through war, which, like, if you live through the Spanish Civil War and then you're going through this really big conflict that is really a collective trauma on an entire nation, and it's continuing even after the main forces are really done. This is something, like, that a child would kind of disassociate, right? And just kind of like look at this and be like, I'm going to put myself away from this. People have done this all the time. For me, I do think that it was all actually happening in this kind of matter of fact. And I actually have a couple of points that I didn't know if you noticed this, but you know how one of the major rules in film is show don't tell. Did you notice how they
Yes.
kept like freezing or giving attention to the morphine bottle that was given to the mom for her childbearing
Yes,
pains?
I did notice that because
That
it said
she
it
drugged
was in
his
English
drink.
too.
Yeah, she drugged his drink before he chased after her. Right, so she gave like almost like the full vial of morphine inside of his whiskey, or his liquor. I'm not actually sure what liquor it was, but it's like some good shit when it's like in some very fancy glass square bottles, right?
Absolutely, my man.
Yeah, so I maybe he wasn't able to see her because he was fucking zoned out of his mind. The other thing that I noticed too, and I actually rewind it, was that um, when at the end, right, Vidal sees nothing, but then as he walks towards the camera, he looks directly at where the fawn would be, and then he looks at Ophelia. So,
Huh.
is it
That
that
one I
he
did not notice.
yeah, so and it's something of like he gave the look of like he was looking as if there was someone there, right? So would it be possible that he is just kind of like ignoring it for the for the sun or that kind of stuff? And I mean, because he's a fascist through and through. The only person who's like cartoonishly evil throughout this is Surprise, the Spanish version of Nazis. So
I
yeah,
think
dude.
I don't think he was cartoonishly evil because I really liked Vidal as the main villain because I feel like he had a lot of subtlety to him more than just hey, fuck the rebels. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, he
Because
did also beat the guy's face in with a pistol,
oh,
right?
absolutely. I thought it was a beer bottle, wasn't it?
No, I thought it was a pistol. I thought it might have been a bottle, right? But he like
He did turn his face into mashed potatoes.
yeah, he did make his face concave, right? Like it's very much like one of those things of like
You
remember
could
this Del Toro is like one of those people who's been to like film and has done multiple films. He knows that he wants whatever he's showing you is something he wants you to see, right? So the fact that he's showing you realistic violence versus like um, fantasy violence, because the only time that we really see fantasy violence is when the pale man eats the fae, right? But then
yeah.
that's it. Like that's the most brutal thing out there. It's not even like really kind of free framed and thought about. Like it just moves on, right, as if nothing happens. Meanwhile, like him shooting the doctor or him beating up the communist hunter, right, that was there, it all shows it, and it kind of like stays on that. It shows you, it's like, look at this violence. This is awful. You need to pay attention to this thing right here. And that's
No,
hard to
the
do.
reason I bring it up is because he had that broken watch on him because like you said, Toro shows you if he's showing it to you, that's because it means something, right?
Right.
Like he's not a man to waste time in his movies. And I kept wondering what's up with the broken clock, right?
Right.
And then we get to the dinner party scene, and one of the other guys, the elites, was like, I know the story. Your father broke the clock so you would know his exact time of death. And he said, nah, that's a lie. He never even owned a clock.
Mm-hmm.
But we see him constantly checking his watch,
Right.
like before shaving, in the middle of a gunfight, everything. And I thought that was really interesting because it gives a look into what type of villain he is. Because I think it was mostly his upbringing. Because one, he
Mm-hmm.
rejects his father, but two, he is his father. Because back in those days, it was very easy to like run up the ranks of the military based on lineage, right?
Right.
Like I'm saying, Vidal, he earned his spot to where he is because he's a very smart leader, a very vicious, ruthless, effective man. But
Yeah.
I think he was groomed for that position ever since being a kid, being the leader of being the son of a general, right?
Yeah.
Because
I am because I mean, obviously, since I have my master's in history, right? I know a little bit about like the Spanish Civil War, and like the Phalangists were essentially these conservative, like pro-Catholic, pro monarchists that really did believe in kind of like the establishment, right? And so it would make sense that Vidal's father would be a general within that kind of the Spanish military, and then him kind of inheriting this role from his dad to become a captain and really carry on this, because that's what phalangists in Spain are all about. They're all about tradition. If you ever
mhm,
wonder about like what essentially Spanish conservatives are, it's all about that traditionalism, and you see it within like the movie itself. Because if I liked the movie because I saw that a lot of fascist imagery, was really present within the film itself. So, like, have you ever noticed how, like, Vidal is, like, constantly cleaning himself and constantly shaving and constantly, like, grooming?
Yeah,
Is
and I was
because,
about to bring that up too
yeah,
because the scene that got me was he was shining his own boots, right? Now
yeah,
this is a leader. He does not have to shine his own boots, but this man takes pride in his appearance. He takes pride in what other people think about him,
yeah.
what they
And
see.
and that's part of the thing about like fascism, and especially is that there is this idea of fascism that you need to purify, right? You need to purify yourself, or you need to purify your country, whatever it is. And so him cleaning his boots and being immaculately clean, except within, like, even in this, like, that shootout on the mountaintop, he was like not really sweating, he was not really there. Like, did you just see how he was kind of like even clean? Like, you would think that a shootout in the mountaintop, he wouldn't be wearing his like best uniform, his like almost Nazi-esque Hugo Boss style kind of officer uniform, while he's like in a gunfight, but he's still doing that, and he looks,
Yeah,
good doing it.
you
So,
gotta dress for the job you want.
oh, I guess he's got it right, but um, yeah, there are. I like Del Toro because I think Del Toro does a lot of like European mythology, and he's really mixing a lot of mythology within this movie itself. I actually counted 4 different mythologies that were kind of being spread throughout this, because I don't know if you know this, but Spain actually has a lot of Celts, like a lot of Celtic people. Because you know how like Ireland and Scotland have Celts, and then you're gonna like, oh well, Spain actually does have a lot of Celtic people that like resided in the northern areas of Spain. And let me look at some of my notes here that I had. So all the pagan totems that you're seeing around there, they also have Celtic line work in like circles and 3 triangles or that kind of stuff. There's also that pagan face in the side of the road was there, which is also very Celtic. And then there was the pagan face on top of the arch of the labyrinth that was there. And then in the middle of the labyrinth, where the fawn is, you see a pagan, like almost tablet, kind of standing up within the middle of these circles that are very Celtic in nature. And I actually looked it up because I was like, huh, this seems to be alluding to a lot of Spain's Celtic past. And Spain is like hardcore Catholic, right? So why is this stuff still around? It would be my kind of thing, but still, if you're looking at it, did you notice how when the fawn says that is me, and he talks about like I go by many names, and he goes, I am the forest, I am the trees, I'm like that kind of stuff. Pan is the god of the wild and shepherds, but he's not the god of forests. He's not the god of trees, right? In Celtic
Of course.
mythology, there's actually a horned god that takes over and is a part of that kind of thing.
The
So,
Lorax.
no, it's not the Lorax, but still, I'm trying to remember what his name was because I had it written down, and I'm looking through this because I am going to be upset if I don't say this pretty soon. I know, but still. Um,
Well,
yeah, when
speaking of
he goes by many names, there is. Okay, go ahead. Here, go ahead
uh,
while I'm trying to find it.
yeah, I was gonna say, speaking of mythologies, what can you tell me about the Pale Man?
The Pale
Because
Man?
so here's a little fun fact about the Pale Man.
Yeah.
He was played by Doug Jones, who
Mm-hmm.
is famous in the horror movie world because if there's like a big monster with a giant costume that takes like a contortionist with muscles to do it, they call in Doug Jones. This guy, he's a monster costume beast. And he says that the Pale Man costume was the most comfortable costume he's ever worn in his life, at least, back in 2006.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which which I think
Yeah.
is hilarious because one of the issues with the costume is that in order to move like the ears or like the mouth, they had rotors in the helmets, right? So he couldn't hear a darn thing. I forgot who Ophelia's actress is, but his only cues was looking at Ophelia through the holes in the nose, in the nostrils, because he couldn't hear anything. So he had to watch for her cues and then start reacting. But yeah, according to him, the most comfortable thing he's ever worn.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it did look like it was just kind of draped over him, right? So,
It was padded a lot, but the padding was put all in the waist and in the shoulders, which according to him was great for the weight distribution.
yeah. I mean, hey, there. So the god of the Celtic god with horns, that is the god of trees and the god of fawns, is Cernos.
Oh,
Cernunos. It's kind of like, because with Celtic and Irish, like Gaelic, it's really difficult. Like the hardest thing about learning Irish is that like pronunciation. So Kiernos, Kiernos is the fawn, right? And it's one of these things of like every single detail about the fawn doesn't scream Greek fawn; it screams Kiernos, right? Because the other idea about it is that Kiernos is also a trickster too, right? So, and the fawn in Pan's Labyrinth is very much like this, very like, oh, you sweet child, come here, let me like, give that. And he's very maniacal and very like, how do I like? He doesn't put a lot of information out there, right? He just kind of keeps it to himself. And like
and
with the Pale Man,
I feel
right?
like yeah, I feel like that was a great parallel. Ah, smart word, parallel. But
Right.
anyways,
Yeah.
to what the doctor said about Vidal, right? Because when the doctor mercy killed the stuttering rebel, also that was such a screwed up scene. Like, hey, count to three and I'll let you go. That that was
Yeah.
really mean. But
Jesus, man, like that was brutal. To any torture scene was like really kind of a big thing, but still,
yeah. But anyways, the doctor when he mercy killed the stutterer, um, when Fidel told him you could have just obeyed me, he said, nobody can obey without questioning, quite like you can, Vidal. And that's when Vidal killed him, right?
yeah, he
And
shot
the
him in the back.
fawn,
Yeah.
yeah, the fawn, um, because she disobeyed the first time. Also, could you imagine almost getting killed for two grapes? I swear to
Dude.
God.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Is that it's supposed to be she's supposed to kind of follow his orders, but not really. He's not really giving her a real reason to. And there's
Exactly.
almost like it's
And
almost
that
like
brings
that
it back to the
Persephone. Yeah.
questioning. Yeah, it
Yeah.
brings that back to the questioning because he's like, "All right, fine, I'll give you a second chance." But
Hmm.
you can't like you need to listen to everything I say.
Yeah.
Like you cannot question me, which parallels Vidal because he's a general. That's what he does. He follows orders and he expects people to follow orders as well. And I think it was great. Like I forget, was it Mercedes who said like you shouldn't trust fawns? And like
Yeah.
for the second text, she was like, "Well, why should I trust you?" And I
That's
forgot what
true,
he
right?
replied.
But
Yeah,
then it would also make sense that he would be Kernos, right? Because the whole idea is that Kernos is like a trickster god, and he's sort of the person that, like, the pagan gods of like Irish and Celtic mythology basically tell to go do things, right? Um, and isn't it interesting that he is one of the gods of like lying, but his entire mission is a lie, right? Because at the end, when they're like, "Oh, congratulations, like you didn't murder your baby brother," and like you rather sacrifice yourself, and like his entire mission was to kind of like mislead her and see if she could overcome like him misleading her with every task. So,
oh yeah.
yeah,
Speaking of which, what can you tell me about the Pale Man? Because that was honestly, honest as a grown man, that's one of the most horrifying things I've seen in my life. He became goofy once he put his his eyes in his hands. That gave me a chuckle. But before, when she just walked in the room, a big feast with him just sitting there with two eyeballs on a plate, that might be the most horrifying thing I've seen in a good while.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
What can you tell me about him?
so the Pale Man, according to Guillermo del Toro, because I actually looked this up, he had tweeted out way a long time ago that the Pale Man actually represents institutional evil feeding on the helpless, and so it's kind of interesting to note that like the Pale Man is just sitting at this table with everything, right? And anyone who is hungry and tries to come get this stuff, like he'll eat them because remember that's what that's how the rich do this with the poor, right? The rich hold all the wealth, and when the poor try to get something, the rich enact like brutal retribution on them. So I guess that can make sense, but like the actual creature that he's based off of is like Japanese. So like I said, remember when I said I told you there was like 4 different mythologies that I counted within the movie itself? Because you have Celtic, you have German, Vikingish kind of there. You have Roman and Greek, and then obviously then there's Japanese. So there is this creature called the Tenome, and the Tenome is a tale about this blind man who was robbed and stabbed and became essentially a monster because of like, because you know how like in Japan they have like these things where people can become yokais by having like anger when they die or that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to note because the Tenome has actual eyeballs within their hands, right? And they can actually run very quickly, and they're pretty strong. And there's actually a legend, if you don't mind me reading. I can read. Do you want me to read you the legend that I found about it? Because it's quite interesting.
I didn't know you spoke Japanese.
I don't, but I just know how to research, right? So in Shichijo, Kyoto, a young man entered the graveyard at night as a test of his courage. From out in the darkness, an old blind man approached the young man. When the elderly figure got close enough to be seen in detail, the young man saw that it had eyeballs on the palms of his hands and that it was coming after him. The young man ran as fast as he could to a nearby temple and begged the priest for a sanctuary. The priest hid the man inside of a long chest and locked the lid. Shortly after, the monster entered the temple, sniffing loudly as if it were hunting. The young man could hear hear sniffing noises getting closer and closer until it stopped, right next to the chest that he was hiding in. Then there was a strange slurping sound, like the sound of a dog sucking on an animal's bones. A little while later, the eerie sound vanished and all was quiet. The priest opened up the chest to let the young man out, but all that was inside was a chest of loose, empty skin of the young man. His bones had been completely sucked out of his body.
Sweet Lord. I think the priest knew he was doing. He was like, all right, you know what, get in this chest. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide in this bunker with 7 guns.
Yeah, I mean, it's just funny, right? Because, like, actual tenome, it just means in, like, from Japanese translation, eyes and hands, right? Eyes on hands.
And that's what we were talking about earlier. Direct translation versus colloquial translation.
Yeah, but still, like, it would makes sense that like Guillermo del Toro's impression of this is if he's such like a nerd for like comics and other cultures that it would make sense that he would, know what a tenome is and know how to implement that. I just think that like it's frightening. The pale man is like is a nightmare fuel.
He absolutely.
Yeah, and like it makes sense too that he would eat children, and run after her because that's what he was doing. So, did you also notice how like the pale man was sitting at the head of the table in the very same way Vidal was sitting at the head of the table?
No, I did not. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because that's actually super cool.
Because think about this, right? If Guillermo's tweets were essentially saying that like the pale man represents institutional evil, well then who's more institutionally evil, right, in the real world than a bucking Spanish phalangist, right? A fascist. So
German fascists.
Well, I mean, they're both the same thing, kind of, right? So it's
the only difference is how much paella they consume.
The only difference is that the Spanish phalangists actually won, and
did they?
Yeah, I mean,
no.
Did you not know that like the Spanish in the Spanish Civil War the phalangists were actually like won against the Republicans? Because the Republicans are not like typical American Republicans. The Republicans were Democrats and anti-monarchists and communists and socialists. And so it was like this hodgepodge of people working together. And then you had the conservative phalangists who were essentially Nazis, right? And the Republicans were actually given money and weapons by like, the Soviet Union, while Italy and Germany gave money and weapons to the conservatives, to the phalangists, because they were more like them in that kind of sense. So, yeah. But still, it would make sense that like Del Toro would essentially put someone who is a fascist as like on par with like that,
Yeah, the
and
child eater.
with the child eater, yeah. Because like, did you not notice how like there were like a bunch of shoes in the in the corner?
See, and I saw that, and this has nothing to do with the movie, but I saw the same thing in Little Nightmares, a game I played recently. Is there something about like creatures eating kids and leaving their shoes?
Yeah,
Like, what is that? What is that about?
the shoes are not like edible, my guy. Like right? Because think about like
And their clothes
shoes.
are?
Well, like think about it like this, right? Like shoes have like rubber or shoes have wood if you're like way back, right? And that's not and that's
Okay.
not, really if you're an animal and you're eating something, you would pick around that, wouldn't you? I
All right, that makes
mean,
sense.
yeah,
Okay,
even buzzards don't mess with that kind of stuff, right? So,
and funny story, according to Aleister Crowley, buzzards do not eat Mexicans because their skin is too spicy. Real quote by Aleister Crowley.
yeah, well, that guy had a lot of issues too. I mean, I'm not going to take the word for someone, or I'm not going to take the word of someone who was addicted to opium half his life. So, still,
I implore people, if you can find a podcast on Aleister Crowley, listen to it. That man was insane.
yeah,
But
dude, he was
yeah,
a fucking
the reason I
deviant.
brought up the shoe thing is because, like I said, I wouldn't have brought it up if it wasn't in something that I already saw like very recently. And Little Nightmares and Pan's Labyrinth have nothing to do with each other. So I guess I never put two and two together. Yeah, if I ate kids, I wouldn't eat their shoes.
Yeah, and it's just one of those stuff that I mean, like, right? Like, why would you eat that? Like, it's like eating the wrapper for your food. Still,
Yeah, I could see myself eating a T-shirt.
ooh, do you want to have Stanley theory time? Because I have a theory about the entire movie that I feel like no one else has kind of like gone over. Because they
Well,
talk about like how there are themes in the movie present, like how there's the theme of like desire versus stability and chaos versus neutrality, purity versus dirt, and resistance versus order. And that's kind of like the big themes. But one of the themes that I thought, because I was looking at some of the other reviewers that were had done this before, none of them had actually, and this is something that kind of came up to my mind as I was watching the movie. Have you ever, and let me know if you have you ever read or actually like given any thought about like Plato's full or philosophy called the cave?
yes, in fact, I did a whole presentation about the cave.
Yeah.
Here, let me see if I can explain it, and you can stop me.
Okay.
Basically, life is everybody's locked in a cave, right? And there's a flame behind them, so they can see the flame on the cave wall. They're all facing the same direction, and they're like shadow men. Well, not shadow men, like the elites or something that will walk by the flame with shadow puppets. And
Mm-hmm.
the cavemen, if you can guess what's coming next, you're seen as super wise and like a prophet of some kind. Well,
Mm-hmm.
one caveman escapes, right? And as he steps outside of the cave, he is literally blinded by the light, blinded about like the realization of life.
Yeah.
So he comes back to the cave, but because his eyes got flashbanged by the sun, he can't see, he's having a horrible time seeing. So
Mm-hmm.
nobody believes what he says because they're like, this idiot can't even see the horse on the wall. Why should we believe him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like that's basically like kind of like the setting for it, right? Is that essentially what Plato's doing by his like kind of allegory for the cave is that like you have the people staring at the wall that has the projections of things that are in life, right? Like what a horse is, like these hand puppets, like you're talking about. Um, the whole idea behind it is that there's a person who leaves that cave, right? And when they get out, they're blinded initially, like you were saying, but eventually, what do eyes do? When they go from low darkness to high darkness, or sorry, high darkness to like light, is that they adjust. And so the man kind of goes around and he sees like an actual horse instead of like a shadow puppet horse. And he sees like an actual river instead of like a shadow of a river. and he's experiencing this, and he's like, oh my god, I need to go tell other people. So then he returns to the cave, right? So he comes back into the darkness, and the darkness is blinding, which is kind of like, going back to your small town or that kind of thing. And he believes that, like, giving people this enlightenment, giving people this idea of, like, hey, go outside and see this. You don't have to look at the wall to see, like, the horse. You can go see a horse outside. Is that he's trying to bring them on a journey that he endured, but they ultimately reject him, and they actually murder him at the end of it.
Oh, they killed him?
Yeah, no, they kill the fuck out of him, right? So,
I read the PBS version of that story. Then the PBS
Really?
Kids version, the
Yeah.
Arthur episode special.
Yeah. So like the whole idea is that like the prisoners, if they're able, like anyone who tries to drag them out of the cave, they'll murder him. And the whole idea about the Plato's allegory is that this is for education, right? So if you think about it, when you're sitting down and you're looking at the wall, you're seeing these shadows, you're seeing these things. These are things that you've been told, but you haven't experienced yourself, right? This is experience. And the moment that you decide to like leave the cave is the moment that you decide to leave what other people have been telling you, what the other people have been showing you, and go experience things for yourself. And remember, that whole thing of like going out into the world and experiencing everything is new, and it's blinding, and it's like almost like anxiety driven, right? Because you're there and it's like, oh shit, I'm actually by myself. How am I going to function? But you adjust and you learn, right? You go to class, you go to college, you go do your stuff, and you're living, you're doing your different things. And then eventually, like when you come back, you want to tell people about like your education. You would tell people about like what you're doing and how you're doing, and people are going to look at you like you're insane because they haven't had the same experiences like you, right? The people that are still within that darkness of that kind of thing of non-education would kill you if you try to drag them out of their own thing, right? So think about like with the whole COVID thing, right? Is that they were experts like, hey, wear masks, wash your hands, stay 6 feet apart. If we can do this, then we can, do the bell curve on like hospitals and try to survive. But then there was a lot of pushback from like uneducated people who are like, you can't tell me what to do. It's a sign of like whatever, some kind of stupid shit, right? So is that not like the people killing the people who left the cave because they
You know what? And that's especially, well, not funny, tragically funny, because much like my character in World of Warcraft, the virus leveled up and it has a stronger variant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now that we kind of got the thing with the play, do you want to hear what my theory about the movie is?
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think the theory about the movie is that
Ophelia was the cave the entire time. Boom.
Ophelia was the person who left the cave, right? Because at the beginning of the story, right, it talks about how like the person that she used to embody, right, sees the sunlight and becomes blind after leaving the underworld, which could be the cave, and then it dies, and then she has to return by also dying. And there's also a lot of like going into caves or coming out of holes or coming out of things.
Wait,
and
so is the underworld the cave or is the earth the cave?
So I'm thinking that the earth is probably the cave, right?
Okay.
So it's one of those of just because like actually no, I think in this scenario it would be the underworld, right? Because the underworld is the cave, and Ophelia is the spirit of that princess Moana who is blinded and reincarnated, right? So she would be the person that goes out into the world and learns what the world has to offer. Because the whole deal is like, remember, she comes back, and when she comes back, she is murdered, which kind of fits the whole thing of the allegory too. Not quite, but you get what I'm trying to get here. And then at the very end, it's that whole line of she ruled wisely for many centuries, right? Mm-hmm. So isn't
Yeah.
that kind of the whole thing of like the allegory of the cave of like this man who's educated goes out and becomes educated in the ways of the world and comes back and wants to share it with the people of the cave and try to get them on their own journeys so that they can become better in that cave. And Ophelia, who is Princess Moana, is essentially that cave person who left and came back. And she has that knowledge, and now she's sharing it with everyone else.
Hmm.
So,
So
um,
I honestly, yeah, I think that's a great theory. As your co-host, however, I'm trying to debunk it, and I can't. The only thing I can say is that she was killed by a human, so not a cave dweller. But you already brought that up, so
yeah, I mean, it doesn't
you,
really like it quite fit it, but I think it is like a pretty good 1-to-1 to the cave,
oh
as
no,
far
yeah,
as like that kind of goes.
I would have never thought about it, and to be honest, I don't think I'm not like the internet authority in, but I don't think I've heard that one yet.
Well, like also think about the thing of like the fawn is teaching her knowledge that is otherworldly, right? So putting the mandrake in milk and putting it underneath the mom makes her better and makes her like and gives her better health, right? And like that kind of stuff, especially within the phalangist Spain, would be seen as like paganism, right? So if these people are like hardcore conservative Catholics, looking at any type of folk medicine would be essentially like sin to them, right? So,
Really? Huh.
yeah,
Because I was one. I mean, Vidal, he's kind of, he's an asshole. So I'm like, okay, I get why he's mad about the Drake and the milk, right? He's probably just pissed that she didn't do exactly what he told her to do. But
right.
I didn't get why the mom would have been against it, right?
Well, I mean, isn't the mom also kind of like, if she obviously married Vidal, then she obviously believes in the fascist movement at some point, right?
I feel like in my mind that was more of a political marriage, right? Like no love. This is something that's gonna help me. This is something that's gonna help my daughter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm not actually sure if that's like true either, right? Because you're not
Really?
really well. Think about that, right? Because at the very beginning, like when she leaves the car, the only time that I've ever seen really tenderness from Vidal is when he's showing it towards Carmen, when he's showing it towards the mom, right?
Even
So
then, he only showed it like at the beginning at that car scene. But you know what? You might be right because I remember she was trying to tell her story at the dinner table. He's like, "You're gonna have to excuse her. She's kind of a stupid peasant. She didn't mean to offend y'all with her boring story."
yeah. Plus, I think it's also kind of funny about like how Carmen, right, which is like the title of the same opera of the same name, where it's Carmen, who is a peasant woman who falls in love with a Spanish officer, right? And they get married, and like she betrays him and that kind of shit. So, it's
Toro's on like seven. He's on like 7 layers of references at any given moment.
dude, this is why I told you this is a good movie. This is one of
This
those
is a good
movies
movie.
that like you need to like watch over and over and over to get kind of all the references because it's fucking there. It's dense, right? And that's why I like Guillermo del Toro as kind of like an author. And you know, because like the whole thing of like, what if it's right that he actually did insert that whole narrative of the cave generally to be like for Princess Moana, right? And that's why when she comes back, she's so wise and loving and kind, is because she saw, experienced the outside world's evil and that kind of stuff, and came back with that kind of, I don't know, whatever. But yeah, man, like this shit is fucking dense, and it's I like it. I love it. Like that's one of those things of I really think that I need to go buy the Blu-ray for this movie so that I can, have it just as a hard copy, just in case Netflix gets rid of it one time.
I know what you
So,
mean, but with that, I say just get get us another subscription, a VPN. This
yeah,
episode sponsored by. I
this
wish.
episode is sponsored
I
by
wish.
fucking no one because this is
As
Nerdville and we
usual.
don't care. Yeah, yeah. Okay, can I give you one more set of imagery and then I'm gonna shut the fuck up and let you
Yeah.
talk for a bit?
I have nothing to say.
You have nothing to say. Okay, so
Because
her first task. Sorry, go ahead.
I
What was
came
it?
here with fun facts. You came here with like philosophy, and I'm here like. So did you know?
Yeah. But yeah, so remember her first assignment is to give the frog those stones that will make him throw up the key.
Oh
And
yeah,
she
and then
goes,
he threw up his entire
I
muscular
know, yeah,
system.
yeah, I saw that and I was like, was that really necessary? Did you have
That
to
was
kill
kind of
the
gross.
Did you have to kill the frog that was acting like a dog? So, but still, for me, what was it? I actually looked at it because if you know Guillermo del Toro has all this symbolism, he kind of like stops on this tree, right? And the tree that is there, and it says in the subtitles, is a fig tree. Do you know what fig trees symbolize in Western culture? They symbolize peace and safety among nations.
Oh
And did
my
you
god.
see how
The
this
fig
fig
tree was
tree?
dead.
Well, the fig tree, yeah, right, because this is Spanish, like this is fascist Spain, right? Just recently, they're still kind of fighting, so it makes sense that like the fig tree, if it represents like the state of Spain, it would be dead and emptied and
Who's the
hollowed
frog
out inside.
represent?
I don't know, maybe the Francisco Franco. I mean,
He
he looks like a froggy bastard, anyways.
he looks
So
like a toad.
he looks like a toad, yeah.
So
But
we fed him rocks. The rocks were bullets.
yeah, but also I think the imagery also kind of speaks to itself because at the end, did you notice how when the flower blooms and the guy's like, you can find it if you know where to look, and the flower was blooming? It was the fig tree blooming,
Yeah, and
meaning that
that's
the fig
that
tree's
was where
coming
she
back to
hung.
life.
Yeah, that was where she hung her dress, and also, I swear I'm an abuelita at heart because I saw her get her shoes muddy. I'm like, ooh, that's not good.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
like,
I didn't get
oh,
the whole thing of like them getting mad at her getting dirty. I was like, she's a fucking kid, guys. Like, come on. Like, it's one of those of y'all are out in this fucking dusty ass cabin in the middle of fucking the mountains of the Carpathian Mountains of Spain, and you're gonna be like, oh hey kid, go out and play and do whatever, and it starts raining and you don't and you expect her to not be dirty at the end of that kind of shit. Get the fuck out of here with that that kind of stuff.
I mean, that's when me growing up, my mom like when we had to go to church on Sunday, she would dress me up in my Sunday best the moment I woke up. Church wasn't until like 3 o'clock. So I
Okay,
like
yeah.
when that happened, it hit me deep. I'm like, oh no, Ophelia, you got your shoes
Mm,
dirty.
what did you do? No, yeah. Uh,
I'm not joking, by the way. That was one of the reasons I hated going to church because I'd have to get dressed up at like as soon as I woke up at 8, and then I can't do anything fun.
right, right. Well, didn't you like the church that you go to? Like, didn't they have like church service at like 4 or 5 in the morning? Wasn't that like the Mormon church, right?
No, no. I forget what church it was because like I don't know, my mom, she's not a religion hopper, but she went through to a lot of churches and she always brought us along.
Oh yeah.
Kind of a spiritual journey for her.
Right. Well, I know that like there are people who do like the Bible study for Mormons, like at really early morning kind of things on Sundays.
Oh
So
yeah, no, I
yeah,
remember now. I did that once and then never again. Because
you're like, yeah, fuck this. I'm
yeah, no,
fucking
it
not. Yeah.
it was an extracurricular in high school where you could show up at like the church house and just go through like normal like Mormon church stuff. But it was at like 5, 6 a.m. in the morning, like 2 hours before school started. I'm like,
Damn.
nah,
Okay.
I ain't doing this for credit.
Okay. Yeah. No, I wouldn't either, dude. Like that's fucked. Still. Um. Oh well. Yeah. But dude, this movie was so good. This is a
It
good
was.
movie. I
I
can't.
honestly did not think we would have this much to discuss about it. This been pretty cool actually.
It's been pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like there are even small things, like at the beginning when they're talking about the myth of like Ophelia's spirit becoming part of the earth. Is they kind of like freeze frame on this blue flower, this blue rose.
Oh yeah.
Um, by the way, that's actually European symbolism, and I know what that means as a German major who
Yeah, that was
did.
the bedtime story she told her
Hmm.
brother. Yeah, there's this flower on top of a mountain that can give you immortality, but the
Hmm.
mountain is like covered in poisonous thorns that will kill you. So now
Yeah,
the flower is stuck up there, unable to give its gifts to humanity. I'm like,
yeah,
whoa, that
yeah.
means something.
Yeah, the overall identity of like the blue flower, obviously from like that whole thing, is that it represents human desire, right? So there are like these people called the Romantics, right, that lived within like the 1700s, and when they were writing poetry, they were writing about like how nature is like with God and how like it's kind of different from like traditional European idealism when it comes to nature, and so the blue flower is kind of this German romantic symbol meaning human desire. And so, like, that rose, that blue flower, giving life is the desire for like immortality and to live on. And all the characters of Vidal's family die at the end. They all have desires, don't they? Like the mom desires to be loved by this fascist. Vidal desires to have a son that will carry on his name and, like purify Spain. And then you have Ophelia, who desires this kind of idea of going away from this violence and becoming something bigger than being this like step daughter to this like brutal, almost dictatorial fascist. So, you know,
Also, shout out to Vidal sewing his own mouth shut. That's so I'm not even talking pain tolerance because that's got to be one of the scariest, grossest things you can do is sew your own mouth shut. Jesus,
dude, 100%. It
bro.
fucking sucks.
Yo, shout out to Vidal, pretty cool dude.
Oh my god, yeah. It's funny seeing some of the photos of the people that were playing in this movie because remember how what was it? We were talking about like, oh, we don't know who the girl that plays Ophelia is or Vidal, like the actual name. So if you actually Google Ivana Bakiro, who is Ophelia, she looks completely different.
Oh
She
yeah, I
definitely
actually did. Because she grew up.
yeah.
She's no longer 7 years old like she was in 2005.
Yeah, she's
Also,
27, dude. She's you might have a chance, my guy.
oh hell yeah. Hey, listen, I fell in love with how you looked like when you were 12. Oh,
That's
so
okay. Yeah.
another fun fact. Sergi Lopez, the actor for Captain Vidal, was known for his comedic roles before doing Pan's Labyrinth. So he really
Mm,
surprised everybody when he came out as like this horrible fascist.
yeah. Well, I mean, he probably channeled a lot of like pain that he had, right? Because a lot of like comedians have like sort of this undercurrent of pain in them.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. You're not
yeah.
allowed to be a comedian unless one of your parents were either drunk, not present, or violent. That's
Okay.
what I've learned in the comedy
That's
world.
that's what I've learned in my time, right? Still.
Yeah, I filled out 3 of those boxes myself, huh?
Oh my god, Robinson, no. Um, anyway, so final thoughts. What do you think,
good,
Robinson?
good movie. I give it a 4.5 out of 5.
Okay.
The
Is that
only
because you had to read? Is that
no,
the
no. The only reason I don't give it a 5 is because I don't know. Like I honestly think there are like too many fantastical elements that will be lost.
yeah,
But that's why I give it the 4.5 because it's a movie that you should go out of your way to watch, and it's now a personal favorite of mine. So that's where the point 0.5 comes in. That's what my
yeah.
point 0.5 is. My point 0.5 is extra Robinson brownie points.
Okay. Um, I feel like my rating system should be like, if it's really bad, it's going to be don't watch it, don't waste your time. If it's kind of good, then just be like go watch it. If it's really good, own it. If it's what is it like the best like one of the best movies ever out there, that would be my
Your the monthly watch.
that would be my watch it every year, right?
Yeah.
So watch it once a year. I think I'd have to put Pan's Labyrinth as watch it every year.
All
Like
right.
it's surprising how good this film was from what I remember it. Because as a kid, right? Like as someone who, because I told you the story of why I got to see this, right? Because that other Ken girl like got me to watch this movie. I remember liking it back then, but I wasn't really giving it much attention because I was a stupid kid. Now, like as an adult, like I have a much bigger appreciation for just the film itself. So yeah, I'm giving it a watch it every year kind of thing. So, or
And
at
I
least
have to
an
agree.
own it, right? Like go out and buy it, kind of thing. Support Del Toro
All
and his
right.
thing.
Oh yeah, support the big bull. Can't wait for his next game, Death Stranding 2, featuring Hideous Kojimas. It's gonna be fantastic.
Okay, minor thing before we tell our audience about what the movie is next week, but dude, Hideo or like Death Stranding, there's so many fetus babies, right? Like it's just like that. Like you see fetus babies everywhere, and then watching Guillermo del Toro's like Pan's Labyrinth, there's even a fetus, like
Oh yeah, there was a
there's
fetus in it.
there was a fetus in it. I'm just like, is this like the requisite like thing that you got to check off on the box for Guillermo del Toro? Is that his movies have to have a fetus
So,
somewhere?
stupid history fact for you big Robinson fans out there. When the trailer for when the trailer for Death Stranding dropped, I was still in high school. Me and my friends called it Norman Reedus and the Fantastic Fetus.
Yeah.
That's what we refer to it as. Norman
Mhm.
Reedus and the Fantastic Fetus.
Yeah. And still, like, it's something about him that he always like talks about, like fetuses, right? So, one of the things that I actually kind of think that happened is that I was reading up on like him before this. Did you know that like he grew up like really strict Roman Catholic, but he's like a raging atheist right now?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
his quote, not mine. So, uh,
We love all religions out there except for Pastafarians. Just kidding. Give me some of that spaghetti monster, bro.
yeah, honestly, I don't give a shit, right? It's like whatever gets you, whatever helps you cope at the end of the day is my thing.
Whatever lets you hallucinate about 5 seconds before you die.
But so, all right. Do you want me to tell you the story of like where I think this connection with the fetus came from?
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
the New Yorker did an article on him back in 2011, and he talked about working at a Catholic hospital in Mexico, and he said that he became a raging atheist after seeing a pile of human fetuses while volunteering at the Mexican hospital.
Jesus
maybe-
Christ.
Yeah, so maybe him, because remember this was a Catholic hospital, right? And they were still performing abortions, right?
No, that doesn't shock me at all. Seeing a dead body is enough to traumatize a man for a good year. Seeing a pile of fetuses, not so these are
Yeah.
morbid, not fully formed baby bodies in a pile.
Mhm.
I'm glad he came out the way he did. Like
Dude,
I'm,
maybe that's like some big trauma with him, right? Maybe that's why he constantly needs to put like the imagery of the human fetus within his work.
No, that's not a maybe for me. That's a fact. I, I don't know why, but I believe that did. Like, if it made him a raging atheist, who knows what else it did to him?
Mhm.
Like, holy cow, that is horrifying imagery.
Yeah, right. So it's one of those of just like I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh my god, man, like what the fuck? Like he's got some trauma behind him too. So
Dude, in the shape of water, that monster creature was just sitting inside a life tube filled with water. You know what else is a life tube filled with water? A womb.
yeah, dude. So
Jesus Christ.
yeah, but hey, interesting to note, his father was actually kidnapped in 1997, which is not, from what I know about like Mexico, is that not like, isn't, and I'm going to ask this obviously as a gringo, right? Isn't that kind of like a normal thing that happens like in Mexico City is like there are tons of kidnappings within the country?
Definitely in Mexico City. Definitely in Jalisco. No, not Jalisco. Definitely in Juarez.
It's apparently he lived in Guadalajara.
Okay, well, it's not that common there, but it is Mexico, so.
But it does happen.
Yeah,
right?
it does happen a lot.
I think it's like it's still like not double, America, but it's like still more prevalent than the United States, like kidnappings. But still, his father was kidnapped in 1997, apparently, and held for ransom.
And I'm
So,
okay. I was gonna assume he was never heard from again.
no, they actually paid. They actually paid $1 million so to pay the ransom.
God.
James Cameron, you know the guy that did Avatar
He
and
came
Alien.
in. He stepped
Yeah,
in.
yeah, he gave him $1
Holy
million.
cow!
So
All right. Well, that's good. I thought it like happened when he was a kid.
no, like it happened in 1997. So he would be, because he was born in '64.
Oh,
So
okay.
he was already like an adult, right, at that time.
Okay.
So
All
still,
right.
yeah, I don't know, but hey, like he's a
Speaking of,
fascinating person. But
he
speaking of
is.
movies, right?
No,
You want to go
speaking.
ahead?
Yeah, speaking of adults with immense mental issues and trauma that they have to get through. Me and Stanley were talking about what movie we should watch next for you people to follow along. And Stanley has never seen The Joker, one of my
No.
favorite movies of all time.
Well, I mean,
So,
like I watched like Batman with God, what was his name? The I'm trying to remember. He goes, it was the the Batman movie where it actually got like an Oscar because superhero
Christian
movies
Bale?
don't get that. No, no, no. It was the Christian Bale movie, but it was the guy that played the Joker then. I don't know
Heath
why.
Ledger. Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger. That's why. Heath Ledger. I watched that one, and Heath Ledger was probably my favorite Joker because I think it's interesting. His nihilistic anarchy is something that is like not really fully explored in other Jokers, right? So, plus
So-
he literally killed himself over that role. So
Unfortunately.
yeah, like he literally gave his life to betray that person. So it was that
So-
kind of stuff, and it's hard for me to compare that to other people, but I'm excited about seeing this one.
So I will tell you this Joker is nothing like what... Well, okay, if you read DC comics, then this Joker will hit close to home with a few spin-offs. But this Joker is nothing like the Heath Ledger Joker.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Not in terms of quality. In terms of quality, they're two different Jokers with their own merits, and both fantastic, but absolutely very different.
okay. Yeah, I mean, because I grew up with the Batman and the animated series. You know, like the thing that was a cartoon, but also not really a cartoon.
Fuck you, Batman!
Yeah, well, God, what was his name? Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill's Joker. I did grow up with Mark Hamill's Joker.
So did I. He's
Yeah.
he's the best Joker. Well,
Yeah.
Joker voice, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But
that
still.
was when Joker was like throwing pies around,
Oh,
like
dude.
explosive pies.
100%. It's so interesting to see Mark Hamill kind of like go from like being who he is to being the Joker and that kind of stuff. It's like a switch for him. But then again, I think that it's mostly his like experience in acting that
Yeah,
kind
he's a
of
fantastic actor.
Dude, my one goal in life is that I want to meet Mark Hamill. If Mark Hamill dies before I'm able to meet him, I will be fucking crushed. I will be fucking destroyed. One of my coworkers, like, tweeted something and Mark Hamill retweeted her back, and I was fucking seething with jealousy for like a week afterwards.
Damn.
I know. Well, it's because I don't have Twitter, man. Like, I don't want to have like a social media account
Yeah.
because I don't know.
We don't have Twitter because, one, we don't fight people online, and two, we don't like children.
Yeah.
In both
That's true.
senses of the word.
Yeah. Although I do remember one time I did make a Twitter for about a couple of months because I wanted to talk shit to Ken Paxton, who's like the secretary. Like, if you're ever from Texas and you know who Ken Paxton is, then yeah, I tweeted him for about a good 2 months and then I just got bored. So, yeah.
Speaking of people on Twitter, guess who's on Twitter now? Me and Stanley by association, because now we have the Nerd Hell Twitter at the Nerd Hell Podcast. I don't know what we're going to do with it. Seems like a good thing to have. We'll probably announce the movie we're watching so y'all can watch it as well, which is The Joker. But we'll figure out what to do with it. If you want to follow us over there, give us a follow. We'll probably tweet out episodes, maybe memes. Like I said, I don't use Twitter because I don't get into fights with people online because I'm happier than that. And you should be too.
Right. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I think that's it, man. So we're good. So next week we're gonna be talking about the Joker, and who knows? I honestly think that we should probably invite Savannah on, right? Because
Absolutely.
I think
Sure.
because Savannah's a licensed counselor, so she has like actual like she went to grad school for therapy and psychology.
Then she would be perfect for this movie because this movie deals a lot with mental health.
Dude, 100%. That's what I'm telling you. Like we should have her on next episode.
Featuring honored guest Savannah.
Yeah, I'll talk to her about it, but still, I think she will be on. But if anything, she can give me some pointers too about like different associations and that kind of stuff. So there you go. Well, yeah, man, that's it.
Yeah.
So
Thank
I'll
you
tell
all
you what.
Thank you all for watching. It's been great. Hopefully you had a good time watching the movie. We had a great time discussing it. And in this episode, Captain Vidal, you can go to hell.
Yeah, you can go straight to hell, you fucking cheeky bastard.
Woo! Good night, folks.